She wore inexpensive clothes to reveal his true character. But what happened next was amazing. Annie's heart raced as she stood in front of the mirror, her thrift store dress hanging loosely on her frame. The gala was less than an hour away, an event meant to unveil the town's newest darling, Mark, the architect whose arrival had set tongues wagging. She wasn't one for this kind of scene, but she held on to the hope that her modest attire would show the world the glaring contrast between authenticity and pretense. With each tug at the fabric, she felt a knot tightening in her stomach, hovering between excitement and terror. Could she really pull this off? With Lily's dreams of attending a prestigious university twinkling in the back of her mind, the pressure felt insurmountable. Every dollar she made as a waitress at Mel's diner seemed a drop in the ocean against the tuition bills to come. She dearly wanted to give her daughter a chance to thrive, an opportunity she never had. Still, walking into that glittering hall felt like stepping into a lion's den clad in sheep's wool. She felt vulnerable, visible in her simplicity, knowing everyone else would parade their wealth like peacocks. But it was more than just her outfit. It was the weight of her own ideals tugging at her conscience. The gossip she overheard at the diner stained her perceptions of Mark and his shiny entourage. They were insincere, riding the coattails of affluence, yet she could feel the undeniable pull of Mark's charisma. What if her first impression of him was clouded by bitterness, driven by fear of what they represented? Doubt crept in, her inner voice chiding her for even considering this bold stand as a means for enlightenment. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Annie swallowed, stepping away from the mirror. The weight of the night ahead pressed down on her, agitation sapping her resolve. She wanted to show Lily what real strength looked like, but she felt so small, just a waitress in a room full of glowing success stories and polished veneers. Each glance in the mirror beckoned her to abandon the whole idea. A deeper fear took hold. What if she was making a fool of herself? The laughter, the clinking glasses filled with unfathomable wealth. It felt like a world away from the one she fought to build for her daughter. Time passed, and as she neared the venue, she battled with an inner turmoil. Was she doing this to stand up for what was right, or was it merely a desperate grasp for affirmation in a world where her efforts seemed eclipsed by wealth? Tonight could change everything or leave her as nothing more than an awkward anomaly among the elite. But did that really matter? Taking a deep breath, Annie pushed through the gala doors. The atmosphere buzzed with false exuberance, laughter echoing hollowly. All eyes turned to her, the oddity among perfection. As Mark's gaze found hers, something flickered between them, electrifying yet unsteady, like wildly different notes in a discordant symphony, an undeniable connection shrouded in uncertainty. But then, laughter turned to gasps as a scandal erupted, the air thickening with opulent distrust, challenging the foundations upon which they stood. Annie's heart quickened. That moment, standing amidst chaos, could tilt the scales of everything she believed in. The stakes had never been higher. Would she seize this chance to embody the integrity she so passionately wished to instill in Lily, or would she falter under the weight of expectation? Chaos erupted around Annie, murmurs and gasps swell like a swelling tide, and amidst it all, she felt the undeniable thrust of urgency that surged through her veins. Mark's eyes remained locked onto hers, but the ephemeral moment of connection froze, suspended in disbelief. This was the opportunity she had hoped for, a chance to expose the duplicity of the affluent society that thrived on pretense. But as the voices rose in scandal and speculation, uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. She wanted to stand tall, to confront the powerful facade they all wore, but vulnerability swirled around her, tightening its grip. In that instant, she wrestled with the question that lingered, the same one she had been grappling with in the solitude of her room. What did she want from this night? Validation? Change? A new path paved for Lily? The thrumming pulse of the gala dimmed, drowned out by a cacophony of internal voices echoing doubts and dreams. Her background couldn't be erased by simply walking into this extravagant arena. Yet somewhere in that clamor, she began to realize it wasn't just about proving her worth. This was a moment that could either validate her choices or shape new aspirations in a world seemingly dictated by wealth. As people swirled around her, Annie spotted a group snickering in the corner, their laughter laced with derision, directed unapologetically at her presence. Anger curdled within her, igniting a flame of courage that compelled her forward. Hadn't she always been the underdog? There was something powerful in her authenticity, an unshakable tether to her roots. She glided toward the group, her stance adamant, a renewed determination radiating from her. "Is this what makes you feel superior?" Annie's voice rang out above the chattering crowd, crystal clear in the strained air. Hiding behind designer labels and shallow conversations? The jeers quieted, and for a moment, a surprised stillness blanketed the room. She felt every gaze snap toward her, signaling the weight of her challenge. Mark watched, an inscrutable expression swirling over his face. The moment stretched, laden with anticipation. Annie felt the heat of anticipation mingling with fear, the precarious dance between courage and vulnerability. For what if she failed? What if the facade cloaking wealth folded back onto her, an avalanche of judgment and exclusion burying her hopes? Yet amid her heart's rapid drumming, a different realization unfolded. The tenacity of voices urging her on. She was more than a waitress in an unexpected dress. She was a mother fighting fiercely for her daughter's future. As the silence held, she recognized the transformative power of embracing her truth rather than conforming to their expectations. "I may not have the luxury of your wealth," she continued, her words gaining confidence. "But what I possess is worth far more, a commitment to hard work, integrity, and a promise to instill those values in my daughter." In that moment, she not only spoke for herself, but also for countless others tethered by circumstances beyond their control. The murmurs began again, but now the tone was different, curiosity laced with unease. She had disrupted their comfort zone, exposing vulnerabilities within their polished armor. And as she cast a glance at Mark, seeking his response, she saw a flicker of respect shimmering behind the surface of his facade, a glimmer of recognition that perhaps he too had questions regarding the world he embodied. Annie stepped back, feeling the warm glow of self-validation wash over her amid the chaos. This could be the catalyst for change, not just for her family, but for those ensnared in the web of materialism. The palpable tension had shifted, and she dared to wonder if her act of courage could inspire others to reevaluate their values. But just as hope blossomed, a loud crash from the opposite side of the room sent ripples of panic through the crowd. The elegant chandelier began to sway precariously, and all eyes darted toward the source of the disruption. Whatever had drawn her into confrontation now threatened to derail everything she had just started to build. Annie's heart pounded anew, a tumult of dread and determination mixing as she prepared to confront whatever chaos was about to unfold. Would she emerge as a champion of authenticity, or would she be swept away in the turmoil? The very foundation of what lay ahead rested on the decisions made in the next moments. The chandelier swung with a disconcerting grace, casting glimmers of light off the lavish decor, while whispers transformed into frenzied shouts. Annie felt the energy shift like a tide pulling back, leaving only scattered fragments of confidence threatened by impending chaos. She stood there, heart racing, as the tension in the room pulsated against her. The source of the crash became evident. A group of rowdy attendees had bumped into a server, sending trays of champagne tumbling onto the marble floor. The air thickened with disbelief and irritation, each gaze now a fraught mix of judgment and disdain. In that instant, Annie understood the precariousness of her position. This was more than a mere incident. It was a test, a glaring reminder that even her bravado could be swept away by an unpredictable maelstrom. Instead of retreating, she felt a flicker of opportunity igniting within her. While chaos reigned, she could either become an unremarkable part of it or seize the moment to further her voice and message. "Enough," she muttered, unrelenting in her purpose. In the haze of confusion, Annie stepped toward the epicenter of the disturbance. Her mind raced. "What can I do?" as she formulated a plan. Perhaps this disruption could be reframed as a catalyst for her cause. The inequity of wealth made flesh through this incident. She recalled the faces of her daughter's classmates who were too proud to accept charity, the unyielding pressure to conform to social norms. All around her, people were investing in appearances while overlooking the cost, a cost borne by those who lived on the margins. "Can we please help those who are struggling to serve us?" She spoke loudly, her voice cutting through the din, choppy and raw, but resolute. "Each one of us has a role here. Let's not forget the hard work that keeps this evening afloat." The murmurs began to settle as their attention gravitated toward her. Mark reappeared, pushing through the throng. He seemed surprised, almost in admiration, but she recognized a sliver of apprehension darting across his features, propelling her forward. She took a step back from her fears and leaned into the discomfort, drawing strength from her authenticity. "Please, let's refocus here," Annie continued, with firmness eroding her ingrained doubts. "We're celebrating tonight, yet look around at the people made invisible between us. Let's extend our gratefulness not just through our glasses, but in our actions. It's their labor that allows us this moment." With each word, she saw curiosity replace hesitation, apprehensions momentarily dissipating among the crowd. Mark leaned closer, and she could almost sense him evaluating her, not just as a woman dressed as a servant, but as someone who ignited thought. Suddenly, he touched her arm lightly, as if to acknowledge her growing bravery. The brief contact sent a ripple of warmth through her, urging her onward. "This is what you've tapped into," she thought. "Your voice has weight." As the atmosphere began to shift, she sensed a collective introspection emerging. The moments of vulnerability she had shared had tapped into the core of what mattered: individual accountability, honesty, and connection. She caught the eye of several guests who appeared unsettled, perhaps reflecting on their own roles in the hierarchy of wealth. Could this be a moment of reckoning for them? But just as the tide began to turn, the tension in Mark's expression grew taut. "Annie," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "This is volatile territory." She saw his concern, yet it only made her more resolute. If her act of courage was powerful enough to disrupt the affluent's comfort, perhaps it was also strong enough to challenge their foundations. Feeling the unwavering gaze of the crowd and the crackle of electricity in the air, Annie pressed on, ready to dive deeper into the heart of the matter. "What does it say about us, about this place tonight, that we can leave behind the humanity in service?" As she concluded, a heavy silence enveloped the room, yet there was a crackling energy beneath it, a hunger for something deeper, for a genuine connection beyond surface-level interactions. The stakes had risen. Now, a locked determination settled in her. This was not merely about a shifting chandelier or errant champagne. It was about her journey, her relentless striving toward authenticity and worth. But looming in the shadows was the realization that the truth could not merely spark interest. It could ignite resentment amongst the privileged. "Annie?" Mark's voice cut through her thoughts again, shifting from concern to an urgent depth. "You're stirring something here. Are you ready for the fallout?" The question hung between them like the swinging chandelier. Its implication sent a chill down her spine. Would she retreat now that the stakes were eternally higher, or would she boldly lean into the very conflict that her authenticity had unleashed? Annie stood in the throbbing quiet, feeling the weight of the moment press against her chest. Mark's question spun through her mind like a record stuck on repeat. Ready for the fallout? The very notion both terrified and exhilarated her. She could step back, allow the echoes of uncomfortable truths to dissipate, or she could step further into the flames, wielding her newfound voice with unyielding determination. As the silence stretched, she could almost hear the thoughts of the crowd. Curiosity shifted to confusion, then to reluctant introspection. A cascade of realizations washed over her. She was not merely a spectator thrust into a moment of discord, but an active participant shaping the narrative. "Annie, think," she reminded herself, her heart hammering as adrenaline surged through her. This moment wasn't just about addressing disparities. It lay in reframing humanity within a gilded cage. She needed to forge a bridge between the lives lived on either side of the ornate divide, a chasm she had long overlooked despite being so close to it. Maybe the fallout isn't about consequence at all, she mused, mentally framing her charge to inspire. If I can make an impact, perhaps that's a mark worth facing adversity for. The thrill of agency coursed through her veins, bolstering her resolve. "Tonight is about understanding our connections," she declared, her voice steadying, drawing all eyes to her with an unshakable certainty. "Each of us here is part of a chain that connects lives. The servers, the staff, the individuals providing comfort. Many of them are working for what is often our mere luxury. We can choose to see them or not. We can choose to acknowledge their contribution or let it fade into obscurity." Mark's reaction was immediate, his brow furrowing in contemplation. The room was no longer a theater of opulence, but instead a gathering of souls confronted with truths too significant to ignore. The fear didn't vanish, yet it became an ally she could harness. Annie took a bold step closer to the gathering, her posture commanding. What would it look like if we truly acknowledged our shared humanity? If our hard-earned wealth was accompanied by gratitude, genuine appreciation, and a sense of responsibility? With each word, she forced the room to reckon with itself, challenging them to exercise their empathy where it had previously faded. She noticed a few people shift uncomfortably, yet others began to nod or murmur in agreement. A couple of guests even stood, the power of their privilege tangling with dawning self-awareness. Annie felt a pulse of hope. This was not merely the hopeful gaze of acquaintances, but the sway of transformation in action. In that moment, her mind turned startlingly inward. Were they changing because of her words, or was this shift already simmering within them? Were they capable of genuine self-reflection? She had set a fire, but she couldn't control how it spread. Mark's expression softened, and he stepped forward, the distance closing. "You're on to something," he affirmed, his voice low but firm. The sincerity in his eyes shifted the air between them, creating a fragile bond amidst the tension. But the unease never left. Cries of dissent loomed within her. The fear of backlash, of betrayal from those who had once been allies, lingered at the edge of her consciousness. What would they think of her once the masks had slipped? Caught between empowerment and vulnerability, Annie braced herself, wrestling with the knowledge that the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. Failure felt imminent, yet success shimmered like a beacon just beyond the blaze of trepidation. And then, her heart sunk as she noticed a familiar face from the crowd, a former friend, now an adversary who bore the scars of a shared history. He watched her with a dark intensity, and the recognition of hostility simmered in his expression. This was just the beginning. As the confrontation unfolded, a storm was brewing in her soul. She would need every ounce of courage to face not just the people in the room, but the layers of her own fears still hidden beneath the surface. She raised her chin, unwilling to yield. "The time has come to face the truth. Can you handle it?" With that, the tension thickened, and Annie braced herself for whatever revelation awaited, her heart racing at the thought of the argument to come. Annie felt the weight of eyes digesting her presence. It pricked at her confidence, but she harnessed that energy, channeling it into her resolve. Her former friend, Luke, stood entrenched at the back, arms crossed, a sentinel of skepticism. The air was heavy with unspoken words between them, remnants of a shared past shadowed by their divergent paths. Would he disrupt her moment, or would he recognize the gravity of the topic at hand? "Annie," he called out, his tone dripping with a condescension that ignited her ire. "Are you really suggesting we owe our success to those we employ? How naive can you be?" A rush of heat flooded her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a simmering determination. This was it, the battle she hadn't quite anticipated, yet had inherently known she would face. "Naive," she repeated, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "Naive is thinking our lives exist in isolation. Every success story is stitched into the fabric of countless others." The crowd reacted, shifting between discomfort and fascination, and Annie seized the moment. "I didn't come here to placate anyone. I came to shine a light on sacrifices and complicity. Our wealth is built on someone's often unseen struggle." In Luke's eyes, she saw a flicker of uncertainty. That fleeting moment gave her a boldness she almost didn't recognize. She took a few steps forward, circling the room, allowing her emotions to spill. "Too often we choose ignorance, but perhaps it's time we opened our eyes. What are we without those who elevate our existence?" Her words rippled across the crowd, igniting murmurs of dissent and agreement. Mark appeared to lean in, intrigued by her fervor, while Luke's face grew darkened with churning thoughts. Each response, each flicker in the audience, was a pulse, reminding her of the profound impact of vulnerability. "Annie," Luke interjected, his voice rising above the din. "This isn't a charity gala. It's a celebration of accomplishment. Why disrupt success with guilt?" At his words, a wave of anger surged within her. It wasn't guilt she felt. It was indignation, a righteous flame she longed to share. "You think showing gratitude for those who support our success disrupts it? What does that say about the very foundation on which we stand? Are we so fragile that acknowledging others diminishes our worth?" Silence enveloped the room. Ducking beneath the depths of her fear, she confronted what lay ahead. Her insides twisted with trepidation, but she realized this confrontation extended beyond Luke. It was with every subconscious fear that had nudged her back, whispering to retreat. Are we too proud to accept that we thrive on a foundation built by the sweat and tears of others? She paused, her gaze sweeping across the crowd, searching for glimmers of understanding. History teaches us painful lessons. If we don't acknowledge those sacrifices, we risk repeating it. Luke shifted, visibly shaken, a crack forming in the armor he had exhibited with such confidence. Annie noticed the moment his eyes darted to a server passing by, the young woman's expression unreadable yet hopeful. At that instant, Annie caught a glimpse of Luke, not just her adversary, but a product of a world that had neglected profound truths. "Annie, you may inspire some here, but others see you as a threat." His voice dipped as a challenge underscored the tension. "You risk everything for an ideal that might crumble." "Risk?" she shot back, her pulse hammering. "What's at stake is the humanity we refuse to recognize. If my words shatter delusions, then so be it. I'd rather be a voice for conscience than a silent witness to complacency." The weight of her declaration hung in the air, thickening the tension. A deeper understanding dawned upon her. This wasn't merely about convincing the crowd, it was about standing unwavering against the tide of her own fears. As she stared at Luke, she recalled deeper layers of their past, the shared moments that had once united them under similar dreams. They were not just opponents, they were characters in a shared narrative, one she hoped could still be rewritten. Just then, a hushed whisper echoed from the corner of the room, drawing all attention. "What if we acknowledge them by inviting the ones we use into our circles?" Annie turned to the figure who dared to speak, heart racing. Would this spark initiate a transformation, or would it ignite a greater conflict? The question echoed, the answer looming ahead like a precipice. Would she have the strength to stand firm as the truth unwound, revealing hidden dimensions of their shared reality? Annie's heart pounded in her chest as the room quieted under a heavy veil of anticipation. The unexpected question hung in the air, its potency striking at the core of what she had dared to propose. Did the speaker truly understand the weight of the inquiry? Was it a genuine impulse toward change, or merely an act of rebellion against her challenge? She focused on the individual who had spoken, a young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, nervously toying with a silver bracelet that complemented her simple attire. The server's expression reflected a mixture of hope and fear, keenly aware that her suggestion could bring about a reckoning or a backlash, much like Annie's own position. Why not, indeed? Annie's voice rang clear, an incitement against the undercurrents of doubt. What if we brought those we depend upon into our dialogue, into our successes? Luke's expression darkened further, but Annie felt the stirrings of something powerful, an undercurrent that bound her not just to her own conviction, but to that of others who might feel similarly trapped in silence. "How do we initiate that change?" Another voice broke out from the back. It belonged to Mark, now leaning closer, visibly captivated. "Are we ready to face the consequences of acknowledging our invisible ties?" Annie's mind raced. This was her opportunity, not just to vocalize her beliefs, but to blueprint a plan for collective accountability. The specter of her childhood ambition flickered to life like a once-extinguished lantern. She hesitated, weighing the gravity of response against the risks of vulnerability. "What if we host an open meeting?" she suggested, envisioning a space for those often left unheard. "Let's invite those whose labor and sacrifices often go unrecognized, those whose voices should amplify the narrative we've silenced." The curious glances exchanged among the crowd murmured an unspoken language. Both fear and excitement lingered at the edges. Perhaps they embodied the courage she needed. This was more than a performance. This was an incursion into the fabric of their practiced lives. Yet the familiar taste of trepidation rose in her throat. What if they rejected the idea outright? What if she faltered in her follow-through? "Annie," Luke interjected, voice stark against the tentative whispers. "You can't merely drag people into the limelight. Not all will want to be a part of this spectacle you're concocting." The challenge was overt, yet Annie caught the tremor of uncertainty in his tone. Was he protecting their fragile status quo, or was he afraid of what this movement might reveal about himself? She furrowed her brow, analyzing him not just as a rival, but as the old friend she had stood beside during countless adolescent dreams. Maybe they won't want to be seen as part of our accomplishments, but perhaps we can offer them a platform, a means to share their own stories. Her determination intertwined itself with an authenticity that she had fought hard to honor throughout the night. It's a chance to rewrite what success looks like. For every lingering look she received, Annie felt the warmth radiate from her burgeoning energy, like threads weaving a tapestry. Yet, the tension created by Luke's wary frown snapped her back. Would he combat her push, driven by a need for self-preservation? "You're proposing a risk," he stated flatly. "And risk is often accompanied by severe pushback, the kind that could cost you everything. Is that what you want?" The room sighed, the collective uncertainty thickening like fog. Annie drew a sharp breath, daring to push through. If everything I've worked for hinges on placating egos, is it worth it? I'm ready to redefine success. But I need to know, are you with me? As she pressed her lips together, the weight of her challenge settled heavily upon her shoulders. Would she find collaborators willing to face their fears alongside her? Or would the room fall back into its old patterns, retreating from honesty and vulnerability? Her gaze swept across the assembly, lingering on the young server who had sparked this moment. What awaited her just beyond this pivotal confrontation? Instinctively, Annie knew she was at a crossroads. The very future she envisioned lay intertwined with the choices of those around her. Then, from the back, a voice rose, hesitant yet stirred with intention. I could help. Annie's heart leapt, sensing the tides ripple outward. What if this was just the beginning of a much larger wave? As anticipation bloomed, she readied herself for the unfolding chapter that awaited them all. Would collaboration emerge, or would they retreat into silence once more? The crossroads beckoned, but Annie was resolute in her pursuit to transform the moment. Annie felt the tremor of the room shift as the words hung in the air, uncertainty morphing into a tentative resolve. The server's admission ignited a spark in her chest, one she had long since buried beneath layers of doubt and fear. You could help? She echoed, her mind swirling with the possibilities that a single voice could manifest. A chance to nurture the seeds of change she had only recently dared to dream about. The server, who Annie now recognized as Emily, stood straighter, clarity emerging in her demeanor. I've seen how we're ignored, how our stories fall on deaf ears. I want to be part of something real. Her eyes gleamed with nascent conviction, and for the first time, the weight of the room shifted towards optimism rather than trepidation. Annie wasn't prepared for the swell of hope, mixed with the anxiety of the unknown. Her chest tightened with the realization that this was no longer just her fight. It was evolving into a collaboration that could challenge the very fabric of their interactions. What do you envision? She asked, the words flowing as she leaned into the moment, digging deeper into the possibility that lay before them. We could gather stories, real, honest experiences from those who've been sidelined, Emily proposed, her voice gaining strength. Each person has a unique contribution that could redefine our narrative. We could showcase them in a way that isn't about us, but about them. A platform for voices we rarely acknowledge. Annie could feel the gears in her mind turning. Emily's enthusiasm was infectious, and the essence of what she suggested connected perfectly with the vision that had ignited her passion. Yes, and we should offer a safe space where others feel comfortable expressing themselves. We need honesty, she asserted, her determination sharpening into focus. It's time to unearth the stories buried beneath silence. Those narratives need to rise to the surface. Yet, her gaze drifted toward Luke, who leaned against the wall with arms crossed. He was processing the shift in dynamics, the fear mingling with doubt. How could she convince him to join? Despite his hesitations, his presence was valuable. It anchored them to the past and could offer stability during tumultuous times. With purpose fueling her next words, she approached him, careful to maintain her clarity amid rising tension. We're inviting visibility, not shaming it. If we truly care about our community, we should embrace the discomfort that comes with authenticity. This isn't a spectacle. It's a revolution of accountability. As she spoke, Annie grappled with her own internal conflict, bearing the weight of their history while pushing through to a new chapter she deeply desired. If Luke rejected this vision, would he pull others away from the potential she saw glimmering ahead? Or would he recognize the evolution that needed to take place for any of them to truly succeed? Luke glanced from her to Emily, uncertainty etched into the contours of his face. You really think analyzing our failures will yield anything? He questioned, a hint of skepticism cracking the facade he maintained. 61% of change comes from acknowledging what's wrong, Annie countered, confidence swelling in her stance. Each word felt like a step towards eroding the lingering wall between them. But it's only through bravery that we can reshape what's possible. Slowly the tension dissolved, allowing a flicker of hope to enter the conversation. Luke seemed to soften, wrestling with his internal battles as he pondered her words. The moment stretched, shared breaths fueling anticipation. Was he ready to take that leap of faith alongside them? All right, he finally said, his voice steadying. If we do this, we do it right. But I need to hear everyone's truth. No half measures. Annie's heart soared. This was the clarity that transcended mere conversation. This was action, and she was ready to lead with conviction. As concepts began to morph into plans, she wondered about the logistics and the outreach required. The group was tentatively forming, but what would they uncover in the rawness of shared experience? With an electric feeling in her chest, she beckoned everyone into the circle to solidify their commitment, knowing that the most vital step lay in the steps they would take together. Just then, a noise startled her, and she glanced over to the far corner of the room, where another familiar figure had been motionless. She hadn't noticed his presence. Was this someone willing to disrupt their delicate balance? Annie felt the shift as apprehension surged, wondering how that shift might alter the fragile alliance they had begun to establish. Would this figure carry past burdens, or would they serve to amplify their call for change? The tension thickened again, as she prepared to face whatever revelation lay ahead, resolute that their path was now entwined with consequences that could reshape all they knew. The figure in the corner stepped into the light, and Annie's breath caught in her throat. It was Jonah, a long-forgotten acquaintance whose presence reminded her of a painful past that she believed she had overcome. He wore an unsettling expression, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability that unsettled the delicate atmosphere. "Thought I could sneak in, huh?" Jonah said, his voice as rough as the stubble on his chin. He seemed relaxed, yet the tension crackled in the air around him, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Annie's pulse quickened, her mind racing with memories of the tumultuous moments they'd shared. Conversations that had spiraled into arguments, misunderstandings that had festered into deep-seated resentment. "What do you want?" Luke asked, annoyance threading through his tone. Jonah's gaze fell on Annie, and she felt an involuntary shiver. "I wanted to see what all the commotion was about," he said, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You seem to have gathered quite the little group here. Planning a revolution, are we?" Annie's heart pounded. The shift both excited and terrified her. She needed to regain control of the conversation. "We're not planning anything hostile. This is about sharing stories, fostering understanding. Would you join us?" Her voice quivered slightly, revealing an undercurrent of hope buried in her fear. Jonah laughed, an unsettling sound that reverberated in the room, casting shadows over their tentative alliance. "You think sharing stories will change anything? People don't care about stories. They care about results." "What if the story is the result?" Emily interjected, her tone firm. "What if the truth is what we need to change hearts and minds?" Annie felt a rush of admiration for Emily, whose confidence acted as a buoy against Jonah's skepticism. But doubts crept in, shaking her resolve. How could she ensure Jonah would not derail their newly forged unity? Deep down, however, a contrasting thought emerged. What if Jonah, with his own insights, could enrich their narrative? Jonah shrugged, an indifferent movement that masked the uncertainty lurking beneath. "You think your little circle can heal this place? I know things that you probably don't want to hear. You've built a fantasy on the ashes of reality." Annie's instincts told her to dismiss him, but something in her prowled towards his challenge. "What do you know?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Her curiosity piqued, but so did her apprehension. What truths might he reveal? "The truth is, change takes more than talking. It takes people willing to step into the arena, to be uncomfortable. You want to listen? Then be prepared for the truth to hurt." His eyes bore into hers, and for a moment she saw flickers of the passionate individual he used to be, before life had dulled his fire. She hesitated. "We're ready for the truth. We want to confront our failures. Your perspective might help others find their voice. It could make the difference we need." "But the voices you're gathering, are they ready for that?" Jonah challenged, his skepticism sharpening. "Be careful what you wish for, Annie. Sometimes the truths we uncover aren't meant to be shared. They can destroy what little harmony you have." An electric silence fell upon the group, tight with tension. Annie's mind raced with the implications of his words. What treasures and torments lay buried within their pasts, waiting to be unearthed? Would she be brave enough to confront them all, herself included? Just as the weight of Jonah's statement threatened to plunge them into despair, a solemn nod from Luke caught her attention, igniting a flicker of resolve within her. "We have to take that risk," he said, and she felt bolstered by his support. "If we're truly committed, we can't shy away from what needs to be faced." Annie inhaled deeply, feeling uncertainty transform into determination. This path would require transparency and strength like never before. "Then let's begin," she said, looking at each person gathered around her. "Let's dive into the stories that scare us. If we're going to change, it must start with embracing all of who we are." But the atmosphere pulsed with unresolved tension. Jonah remained just outside their circle, a darkened silhouette foreshadowing a storm. His presence was unsettling, a reminder that the journey ahead would not just challenge the others, but it would force Annie to confront herself in ways she had long avoided. "Just remember," he said, a chilling warning in his tone, "not everyone is ready to hear what you have to say. And sometimes, even honesty can be a double-edged sword." Annie's heart raced, the urgency of his words echoing in her mind. What truths lay in wait, and would they shatter or strengthen their resolve? As the group began to share, she knew the moment of reckoning was drawing near. Would they emerge transformed, or would Jonah's ominous warning bear fruit, fracturing their fragile alliance and unearthing buried fears that were meant to remain hidden? Annie took a slow breath, feeling the weight of Jonah's warning pressing firmly on her chest. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken fears, each member's anticipation evident in the tightness of their expressions. An urgent need arose within her to transform this space from a mere gathering into a forge, a place where vulnerability could give way to strength. "Who wants to start?" Annie asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. She scanned the group, her eyes meeting Emily's expectant gaze, then drifting to Luke, who nodded encouragingly, a silent pact between them. The inclusion of Jonah's tough exterior, alongside their collective willingness, felt eerily like threading glass with a tightrope. "Why don't you go first, Annie?" Emily offered, her encouragement layered with genuine affection. "This is your vision, after all." Annie swallowed, the urge to retreat nearly overwhelming. To expose herself fully, to unravel the carefully stitched narrative she had woven to protect her heart was terrifying. She envisioned the journey she had taken to arrive here, one painted with triumphs over fears and the suffocating weight of self-doubt. Still, she remembered her commitment. "All right." Annie cleared her throat, feeling her voice trembling despite her best efforts to contain it. "When I was younger, I often felt invisible. No matter how hard I tried to fit in, I always felt like an outsider. I wore the same clothes while my classmates flaunted styles I could never afford. Back then, I believed those clothes defined my worth." As she spoke, Annie's tone grew more resolute. "But I realized that the true value lies not in what we wear, but in who we are and how we connect with others." She glanced at Jonah, challenging him to engage. "I found power in self-acceptance. I thought for a long time I was simply an observer, but I learned to step into the light, even when my voice shook." Annie felt liberated as her words found their rhythm. Her heart still raced, but with each sentence, she uncovered deeper layers of herself, her honesty cracking open a shell that had long felt impenetrable. She took a breath and glanced around the group. She could see expressions shift, recognition flashing in the eyes of those who understood the struggle of feeling unseen. When she finished, silence cloaked the room, a calm before the storm, and she subtly prompted the others. "Who's next?" Awkwardness hung in the air for a moment, each member of the group grappling with their own rawness. Then, Luke stepped forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "Well, I had a different experience. Growing up, I was always the popular one, the go-to guy for advice. But there was a constant fear underneath. I worried that if people found out I wasn't as perfect as I seemed, they would abandon me." His voice dropped, reverberating with vulnerability. "I hid behind a facade, convinced that if I showed my true self, I wouldn't be worth their time." As he spoke, Annie sensed Jonah's posture shift. He leaned in slightly, the walls he had built appearing just a little less fortified. She wondered if he too harbored invisible scars that echoed some semblance of her own. One by one, they began to speak, vulnerability weaving through their narratives, each thread exposing fears and secrets they had long guarded. Moments of laughter intermingled with tears, creating a rich tapestry of shared humanity. Jonah's presence lingered on the periphery, a specter of unresolved conflict, paired with an unyielding curiosity. The group seemed to draw strength from one another's truth, building a bridge across their diverse experiences. Yet, amid the collective healing, a disquiet brewed inside Annie. A part of her recalled Jonah's ominous words. Would the fragility they exposed fracture them, or could it fortify their bond? Just then, Jonah shifted. "You're all sharing, and that's good," he said, finally stepping closer to the circle. "But sometimes it's important to confront your demons head-on, not just through tales, but actions. Let's see if you can back up these commitments you're making." Annie felt her breath catch again, entrapped between his challenge and her own burgeoning confidence. What could he mean by actions? Would he push them further into discomfort just to prove a point? She contemplated the course ahead, recognizing a flicker of reckoning within herself, a call to match her newfound resolve with action. As she looked at the group, determined to take their story from words to deeds, the next challenge loomed over them. How could they not only share and connect, but also confront the very fabric of their fears together? The stage was set. The room pulsed with anticipation, and Annie understood. The moment was ripe. They had to walk through the fire or risk remaining stagnant. But the question remained, would they lean into this discomfort, or would Jonah's challenge prove too daunting to face? Annie stood at the precipice of transformation, each story shared in the circle binding them closer as a community of authenticity. With newfound determination surging through her, she recognized that this gathering had evolved beyond mere words. It was a commitment to action. "We need to solidify our intent and extend our reach," she urged, her voice steady, echoing the collective courage she had witnessed. Jonah's presence sharpened her focus. If they were to emerge unified, they would need to invite him in rather than push him away. "You've been critical, Jonah. If we're to forge a meaningful connection, let's hear your truth," she challenged, an edge of defiance threading her tone. "Fine," he replied, a steely resolve tempered by curiosity. "Being the outsider on the fringes often reveals uncomfortable truths. I know what it's like to feel neglected. It gnaws at you. The question is, will you confront the very system that created these inequalities, or will you just talk?" The room silenced at his challenge, as the weight of his question hung in the air. Annie felt a mix of urgency and excitement, the twilight of complacency fading as the dawn of action approached. If they were to combat complacency together, the first step would be to expand their initiative beyond the confines of this room. "What if we organize a forum, an open platform where various voices can share their stories?" she proposed, her heart racing. "We can create a space where their contributions are not only heard, but celebrated." The words flowed from her, energized by the momentum of the candid vulnerability she had witnessed from everyone present. Luke nodded along, supportive of the idea. "Let's challenge ourselves to engage with those who often feel unwelcome in these circles. We can showcase their narratives, emphasizing the humanity behind the roles people play. It's about acknowledging the tapestry we've woven together." Emily's eyes lit up. "And we'll provide resources and support for those who are ready to enter this conversation alongside us." It's time to break the echo chamber. Under the glow of anticipation, Annie gathered their resolve. Yes, this is not merely a forum. This is an opportunity for empathy and understanding. We will invite those whose sacrifices have gone unnoticed, and in turn, we will grow ourselves. She had transformed doubt into a spark that ignited the room, making possibilities shimmer in the air. The collective energy surged, illuminating thoughts once buried in uncertainty. They began brainstorming logistics and strategies, willing to dive into the complexities of outreach, funding, and shared responsibility. Jonah, who had initially joined as a skeptic, now shifted into a role of collaborative engagement, assisting in fine-tuning their plans, challenge turned collaborator. As they spoke, Annie inadvertently caught sight of Mark in the corner of the room, who had watched in silence, a mixture of admiration and confusion in his gaze. The foundations of their interactions had been shaken. His polished edifice was now threatened by her authenticity. "Mark," Annie called, resolving to invite him into their sphere. "You've seen the power of this uprising. We need your influence to connect with those outside our usual circles. Will you help us spread the word?" Mark nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding illuminating his expression. "Absolutely. I see now how essential this mission is. I wasn't prepared for the depth of honesty here. Consider me in." As they rallied together, voices harmonizing in commitment, Annie felt an extraordinary shift. Each shared experience unfurled into action, their resolve solidified with conviction. They were not merely a group of individuals, they were now advocates for change, linked in mutual purpose. Weeks passed into months as they organized, each thread of their commitment weaving a larger narrative. The forum blossomed into a dynamic platform, inviting people from all walks of life to share their stories. Each narrative unearthed hidden truths, forcing audiences to acknowledge the unique struggles of each contributor. During the forum's inaugural event, Annie stood behind the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd gathered before her. The vibrant energy surged through her heart, a testament to the journey they had undertaken together. Each person present bore witness to the mosaic of human experience, a direct reflection of the courage she had found to confront her fears. "Today," she began, her voice firm, "we celebrate our stories. They hold the keys to understanding our shared plight. We thrive together. We uplift each other. Stronger than before, she felt transformed. Vulnerability had become her armor, giving way to immeasurable strength. The applause washed over her, echoes of gratitude mingling with pride. She had achieved what she once thought impossible, not for herself but for those often unheard. The journey had led her to a moment of fulfillment greater than personal aspirations, a chance to instill lasting change for the generations to come. Finally, as the applause faded, she caught Mark's eye and smiled. He returned the gesture, an acknowledgement of their shared path illuminated by authenticity. The vulnerabilities shed during that pivotal gathering had paved the way toward genuine connection and growth. Together, they had built a bridge toward something extraordinary. Yet even amid celebration, Annie's mind drifted to the future. With every story shared, every voice uplifted, she understood that this was just the beginning. She would continue to face challenges head-on, armed with a commitment to transform her world through authenticity, connection, and respect. Annie had not only discovered her voice, she had proved its worth. She had positioned herself not just as a participant, but as an architect of a new foundation. As she stepped down from the podium, a deep satisfaction enveloped her. What she had achieved was far more than personal recognition. It was an affirmation of the incredible power of shared humanity. Now, it was time for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about Annie's journey and what it means for overcoming adversity. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to feel empowered. You need to show your support now. This is the moment for change.